I call them man bags. And in that case, at Göbekli Tepe, we know they're at least 11,600 years old.
I've suggested that these objects with handles are similar to ones pictured some 7,000 years later in Assyrian art.
Buried in ancient Mesopotamia, a curious shape emerges, a handbag clutched in the hands of gods. Yet an identical symbol appears millennia later in Mexico. Impossible.
Who's holding this strange bag in his hand. And it's just a fact that those identical bags are found in ancient Sumer.
What most people don't realize is that the bag itself isn't the mystery. The real secret is what was in it. And the answer points to a lost technology, a global civilization, and a truth that could change everything. What the gods carried. After several centuries, archaeological evidence indicates that the so-called handbags depicted on Mesopotamian reliefs were used to hold water. But how could a simple, soft-looking bag, depicted in stone reliefs across Mesopotamia, possibly hold water? The inconsistency is intentional because this is precisely where the modern nickname misleads us. Archaeologists now assert that the object is not a handbag at all, but a ritual bucket, a sacred container of life, purity, and cosmic authority. The key breakthrough came at Balawat, near the ancient Assyrian city of Imgur-Enlil. In 1878, Assyrian explorer Hormuzd-Rassam uncovered the colossal bronze gates commissioned by King Shalmaneser III in 858 to 824 before Common Era. The gates were decorated with intricate bands showing royal campaigns and religious ceremonies. A subsequent excavation in 1887 by E.A. Wallace Budge, working for the British Museum, revealed something even more crucial. In the governor's palace at Balawat, Budge's team uncovered small, exquisite metal buckets, identical in shape to the handbags held by winged figures in Assyrian reliefs. The most frequent depiction across Assyrian and Neo-Assyrian art shows a deep, rounded vessel, sometimes slightly flared at the base, built for stability on the ground and sturdiness in the hand. Unlike a hanging textile bag, the vessel's thick body often carries carvings that mimic ribbing, wood grain, or metal embossing. These details hint at real-world materials. Reeds tightly woven, bronze cast and hammered, or carved hardwood polished with ceremonial care. The vessel is always solid, never sagging, never collapsing. It is built for holding something important. Also, the iconic arch is not a strap. It is a rigid, weight-bearing handle, carved with the same solidity as the vessel. Its ends meet the rim seamlessly, engineered as a single unit. In some scenes, the handle rises with such tension that a rounded knob or pommel sits at its apex, like a symbolic crown. A soft strap could never carry water. A rigid handle, however, makes perfect sense for a bucket intended to lift and pour. While one cannot rely on the stone reliefs for literal material identification, archaeology gives us rare surviving metal parallels. These later ritual buckets, made from bronze or copper, demonstrate exceptional craftsmanship, often decorated with geometric patterns or inlaid with precious materials. Their existence supports one conclusion. The Mesopotamian handbag was a high-status ceremonial vessel rather than a utilitarian container. Another thing to note is that the handbag motif is not just one item repeated endlessly. It is a cluster of sacred objects, sometimes related in shape but distinct in meaning. Some figures carry a flat, squared object, sometimes shaped like a four-armed cross, like a small foundation tablet. These slabs, typically held close to the chest, were emblematic of divine law, cosmic order, or the king's authority. They were not casual tools, but symbols of decree and power. Other scenes show a spherical or pear-shaped tool, unmistakably the head of a ceremonial mace, an instrument of authority, warfare, and judgment. Its inclusion reveals another layer of divine symbolism. The gods do not merely nurture life, they enforce cosmic order. Less common depictions show a small pot, often lidded. These may represent containers for incense, oil, or sacred substances used in purification rituals. This entire family of objects, bucket, tablet, mace, pot, points to a single unifying theme. These are tools of sacred authority, the regalia of beings tasked with maintaining order in the universe. They are not random decorations. They are a coded visual language. And the bucket is its cornerstone. The bucket itself wasn't uniform. Some were carved with patterns resembling woven reed containers. Others appeared metallic, decorated with rosettes or geometric designs. This variation indicates that the artists were not depicting a mythical object, but a real ceremonial tool familiar to their audience. The presence of the bucket across different cities, dynasties, and artistic traditions strengthens the interpretation that it had a widely understood ritual purpose. If the primary form is a bucket meant for water, Why was this particular act carrying water worthy of being eternally carved in stone alongside gods and kings? And why, across countless depictions from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, is this bucket almost invariably shown in the presence of a great stylized tree? The Tree of Life. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the tree is more than flora. It is a symbol of divine authority and cosmic order. Assyrian reliefs depict gods and semi-divine beings standing before it, offering or pouring liquid onto its roots, fertilizing its leaves, or otherwise attending to its grandeur. One 8th century before Christ-era ivory plaque depicts a mythical griffin nibbling its leaves, suggesting that the tree's essence sustains not just the world, but supernatural beings themselves. Unlike fruit-bearing trees familiar to humanity, this tree is less about consumption and more about maintenance. It anchors the heavens to the earth and ensures the balance of the cosmos. Thousands of miles and centuries away, the Norse imagined Yggdrasil, the immense ash connecting the 9 realms. Like the Mesopotamian tree, it is not merely a plant, but a bridge between worlds, linking gods, humans, and the dead. Its roots plunge into subterranean waters, its branches reach into the heavens, and its existence ensures the cycle of death and rebirth. During Ragnarok, even as the cosmos faces destruction, the ash tree endures, emphasizing the eternal, sustaining power that trees symbolize across cultures. In the Abrahamic traditions, the Tree of Life in Eden grants literal immortality. When humanity falls from grace, access is barred, and a flaming sword guards the tree. Here, the tree embodies a lost state, a paradise beyond mortal reach. Similarly, the Celts revered sacred trees at the center of their settlements as portals to the otherworld, connecting the living to their ancestors and emphasizing cycles of life, death, and rebirth. In Chinese Taoism, trees like the pantao produce fruit of immortality only once every 3,000 years, signaling that life-giving power may be periodic, earned, or ceremonial rather than continuous. Across all these cultures, the parallels are striking. The tree is central, protected, and embodies life, immortality, and cosmic order. The specifics may differ, but the underlying principle resonates universally. The tree is the axis mundi, the pillar upon which the universe turns. Returning to Mesopotamia, the artistic distinction is notable. Humans rarely, if ever, interact directly with the tree. Instead, it is tended by divine beings or semi-divine sages. The gods are not harvesting fruit for themselves. They are caretakers and custodians of order. The bucket in their hands is the conduit of life, the medium through which the vitality of the cosmos flows. This relationship between bucket and tree is consistent and deliberate. The water is not symbolic alone. It is functional within the imagery, a visible representation of life being distributed, purified, or maintained. What is most striking is how the tree itself is rendered. Its leaves, fruits, and trunk are stylized, often geometric, and never purely naturalistic. This abstraction signals that the tree is both conceptual and literal, representing not just a living organism, but also the structure of existence, the laws of order, and the distribution of divine power. The bucket and tree motif is not limited to Mesopotamia. Variants appear in art and architecture across the globe, suggesting a shared understanding of life's flow and the need for ritual guardianship. In each culture, the tree holds a prominent position, commanding attention and reverence. The bucket or vessel may differ in form, but the tree's centrality is constant. If the tree of life is the source, and the bucket holds its essence, what then is the function of the fruit in the god's other hand? Is it the fruit of the tree, a simple apple of immortality, or is its sharp textured form telling us it is something else entirely? Not the goal of the ritual, but the tool that makes the ritual work. The pine cone. In the carvings we have explored, the gods, or divine sages, are never shown alone. One hand holds the bucket of water, the essence of life itself. In the other, they clutch a small, oddly textured object. To modern eyes, it resembles a pine cone, and for centuries, scholars and enthusiasts alike have speculated, could this be the fruit of the tree of life? At first glance, the theory seems plausible. Across cultures, sacred trees produce sacred fruits, the golden apples of Idun in Norse myth, the peaches of immortality in Taoist China, or the pomegranates of Greek and Persian lore. Such fruits symbolize life, renewal, and immortality. If the tree is the source of divine vitality, it is natural to assume the object in the deity's hand is the harvest, plucked directly from the tree itself. The bucket would then serve as the vessel for its life-giving essence, and the pine cone would be the tangible reward of the ritual, the fruit to be consumed or offered. Yet a problem arises when we consider artistic intent and symbolic clarity. Ancient Mesopotamian artists could render complex ideas with unmistakable clarity. Every curve, every detail, and every object had meaning. When the goal was to depict fruit, they chose round shapes: apples, peaches, pomegranates, or figs. These were universally understood to represent nourishment, life, and abundance. The pine cone, in contrast, is fibrous, scaled, and elongated. It is irregular, pointed, and distinctly oblong, not a shape associated with consumption or life-giving fruit. If the artists intended the object to represent a fruit, they would have depicted it as round, smooth, and immediately recognizable. Its unusual form suggests an entirely different purpose, one rooted not in what is harvested, but in what is performed. This discrepancy led researchers to reconsider the pine cone in its entirety, and from there, several theories emerged. As noted, the pine cone could be a symbolic fruit of immortality, perhaps deliberately stylized. Advocates of this view argue that the ancients were not concerned with botanical accuracy. Instead, the pine cone's scales may represent the multiple layers of life, growth, and regeneration, making it a metaphorical fruit rather than a literal one. It aligns with global myths where sacred trees produce unique, sometimes fantastical fruit. While appealing, this theory struggles under the weight of Mesopotamian artistic conventions. The artists consistently depicted consumable fruit as round. The pine cone's form is too distinct, too irregular to fit this pattern. A more widely accepted interpretation is based on linguistic and archaeological evidence. The Akkadian word for the pine cone is mullallu, meaning the purifier or that which makes clean. This terminology transforms the object from a fruit to a functional instrument. In practice, it is a sprinkler dipped into the sacred water of the bucket and used to sprinkle, cleanse, and sanctify kings, statues, or the base of the tree of life itself. The cone's textured scales are ideal for evenly dispersing liquid. Another interpretation emphasizes the pine cone as a symbolic medium, a bridge between divine and earthly realms. The bucket provides life, the tree embodies the source, and the cone channels that life outward in a deliberate, controlled act. In this reading, the pine cone represents the mechanism of purification and blessing, not the pine cone itself. The god's power is not simply in holding the water, but in applying it correctly, with the cone acting as the instrument of cosmic maintenance. The evidence points overwhelmingly toward the pine cone as a ritual implement, not a literal fruit. Yet the choice to depict it so prominently raises a profound question. Why is this small object so central to divine imagery? The gods are not simply holding water, they are performing an act, an eternal ritual of purification and consecration. And here is where the mystery deepens. If the pine cone is the purifier, the bucket the source of life, then what does this say about the gods themselves? Are they mere symbols, detached rulers of creation? Or does their repeated depiction performing a precise sacred act hint at something more, that these beings were custodians of knowledge and ritual, sages entrusted with the maintenance of cosmic order? From gods to sages. The Mesopotamian gods are not passive figures frozen in stone, they are practitioners of high ceremony. These figures, often identified as the apkallu, are depicted with wings or bird-headed forms, symbols long associated with divine wisdom, vigilance, and intermediary authority. Textual evidence from cuneiform tablets explicitly describes the apkallu as 7 semi-divine sages sent by the god Enki before the Great Flood to teach humanity law, agriculture, architecture, and the arts of civilization. Before the pine cone's meaning was deciphered, one could interpret these images as showing the gods drawing water directly from the tree of life for themselves. Such a reading would imply that the tree's water conferred personal immortality, painting the figures as solitary immortals sustaining their own eternal existence. These beings are custodians of divine order, tasked with transferring the tree's life-giving essence, not to themselves, but to kings, statues, and sacred sites. Their authority is enacted through ceremonial action, not consumption. Archaeological evidence supports this interpretation. In Assyrian palaces, such as Nimrud under Ashur-nasirpal II, reliefs show winged apkallu holding the bandudu bucket in one hand and the pine cone in the other, poised over the head of a king, a statue, or the base of a sacred tree. The repeated depiction of this gesture is deliberate, as it is a ritual libation in motion. The sprinkling of consecrated water as part of purification ceremonies is known as mispai, which roughly translates as the washing of the mouths of divine statues. These ceremonies were believed to activate divine presence and protect the king or object from corruption. The apkallu, therefore, are agents of cosmic maintenance, executing rituals that sustain both spiritual and political order. The iconography further emphasizes their wisdom and authority. Wings, sometimes fully extended, denote the ability to move between realms, to oversee the human and divine spheres alike. Bird-headed forms reinforce this reading, symbolizing celestial perception and insight. These visual cues signal that the apkallu operate in both the physical and spiritual dimensions, executing their duties with knowledge beyond mortal comprehension. Every aspect of their depiction reinforces their role as practitioners of sacred knowledge rather than mere mythological figures. By performing these ceremonies, the apkallu serve as mediators between humans and the divine, custodians of a cosmic order that depends not on force but on precise ritual action. They channel the tree of life, using its water to sanctify rulers and reinforce social and spiritual hierarchies. Kings, in turn, participate in these rituals, often shown receiving the purifying sprinkling, symbolizing their alignment with divine authority and legitimizing their rule. At the foundation of Mesopotamian belief was a stark principle. Humans were created not as beloved children of the gods, but as a labor force. The creation myths Atrahasis and the Enuma Elish are unequivocal on this point. The older deities, weary of toiling to feed themselves, fashioned humankind from a mixture of clay and the blood of a slain rebel god. Humans' purpose was to work the earth, raise crops, build temples, and offer sacrifices to sustain the divine pantheon. This established a cosmic chain of being, with the immortal gods above and mortal humanity below, existing solely at divine pleasure. When human noise or numbers became a nuisance, the gods did not hesitate to send plagues, droughts, or a great flood to cull the population, as seen in the very same Atrahasis epic. This subservient status made the gods' immortality, in their terms, the ultimate, unattainable prize for humanity. Mortality was not just a fact of life, it was a central trauma. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest surviving great work of literature, is fundamentally a 4,000-year-old meditation on this terror. The hero King Gilgamesh, shattered by the death of his friend Enkidu, embarks on a desperate quest for eternal life, only to have it slip from his grasp in the story's poignant conclusion. Similarly, the myth of Adapa explains human mortality as a cosmic clerical error. The wise Adapa, tricked by his patron god Enki, refuses the food of life offered in heaven, thereby forfeiting immortality for all his descendants. In this cosmology, death was not natural, it was a mistake or a sentence, and the tree of life represented everything humanity was barred from. So, when this same ritual tableau appears in the distant Olmec civilization, we are confronted with an impossible question. Did another culture, entirely independently, develop not just a similar-looking bag, but an identical visual expression for an identical concept of divine sages using sacred tools to maintain the cosmic order? The plot, as they say, thickens. The watch. To the modern eye, the drawing on the wrist of the gods is unmistakably a wristwatch. That would imply that long before any mechanical timepiece existed, ancient Mesopotamian artists were depicting one, a notion that immediately raises eyebrows. But it makes no sense. Time in Mesopotamia was measured very differently. Days were divided by the sun's passage across the sky. Nights were tracked using water clocks called clepsydras, or by observing constellations. Months followed the lunar cycle, and years were reckoned by kingly rains or the flooding of the rivers. The precision and portability required for a wristwatch would have been entirely foreign. There was no societal need or technology to track minutes or hours, let alone seconds. Archaeologists and historians note that this misconception arises from modern projection. Our contemporary obsession with exact time leads us to see what isn't there. So what was this mysterious wrist object? There are two main theories grounded in material evidence and visual analysis. Firstly, cylinder seals were widely used in Mesopotamia for at least 3,500 years before the Common Era. They were engraved with personal designs, rolled onto wet clay to authenticate documents, and often doubled as amulets. Some high-ranking individuals wore these seals suspended on cords around the wrist or forearm. When carved into stone reliefs, the knot, cord, and seal could appear as a rounded disc, easily mistaken for a modern watch face. Cylinder seals have been found in thousands of archaeological sites, including Ur, Mari, and Nimrud, confirming their widespread use among priests, kings, and officials. Assyrian reliefs frequently depict kings and divine figures wearing wide, decorated bracelets. Often featuring a rosette motif, these were not decorative in the casual sense. They were visual badges of office or sacred authority. In some depictions, a circular design on the wrist could appear raised or embossed, giving the illusion of a dial from a modern perspective. Such bracelets have been found in palatial excavations in Nimrud and Khorsabad, frequently crafted from precious metals and sometimes inlaid with stones or enamel, underscoring their elite status. Both interpretations converge on the same point. The wrist object signifies authority and office, not timekeeping. It communicates to the viewer that the figure is someone with ritual responsibility, knowledge, and sacred duty. Interestingly, this detail aligns with the broader symbolic system already visible in Mesopotamian art. Figures holding the bucket and pine cone, interpreted as ritual implements, are often the same individuals depicted with the wrist object. This combination signals that the wearer is not just a passive god, but an active agent in maintaining cosmic order. Every element, the bucket, the cone, the wrist bracelet, was deliberately placed to convey rank and role. Archaeological findings reinforce this reading. Inscriptions describe elaborate rituals involving kings, priests, and semi-divine figures, where specific tools and gestures marked authority. For example, the mis-pi, meaning mouth-washing ritual, involved sprinkling consecrated water on statues or royalty, emphasizing purification and legitimacy. While the reliefs cannot show us every spoken incantation, the objects in their hands act as concrete symbols of office and ritual function. Another compelling aspect is how the wrist object reflects literacy and administrative power. Cylinder seals functioned as signatures, essentially personal identification badges in clay. A high-ranking figure depicted with a seal on the wrist indicates that they have the authority to authenticate, authorize, and oversee sacred acts. In combination with the bucket and pine cone, it reinforces the image of a being who is both divine and bureaucratically competent. Even more striking is the contrast with modern assumptions. To the casual observer, the watch suggests mechanical sophistication. To the Mesopotamian, it conveyed authority, office, and ritual participation. Misreading it as a timepiece obscures the true purpose of the reliefs. They were teaching tools that codified the hierarchy of gods, sages, and kings, and demonstrated the proper performance of sacred duties. Together, they convey a message. These figures are custodians of cosmic order, performing actions that sustain the universe and bless humanity. Every element, from the bucket to the bracelet, is a deliberate symbol of sacred duty. Decoded, the scene is a perfect closed system of Mesopotamian belief, which makes its sudden appearance on another continent not just puzzling, but paradigm-shaking. A global symbol in a disconnected world. Historians have discovered a striking anomaly in the ancient drawings. The same sacred objects, a bucket, a pine cone sprinkler, and bracelets of authority, appear in civilizations separated by thousands of miles and millennia. How could such a precise and complex ritual pose travel from Mesopotamia to the Americas, appearing in Olmec sculpture, without any known contact? Let's consider the timeline. At Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, circa 9600 BCE, hunter-gatherers carved monolithic pillars, depicting winged figures holding objects remarkably similar to the Mesopotamian ritual kit. In Mesopotamia, circa 2500 to 600 before Common Era, Sumerian, Akkadian, and Assyrian reliefs formalize the motif, central to kingship, religion, and divine authority. Monumental stone figures in Mexico's Olmec civilization also show a strikingly similar pose of a figure grasping a distinct handbag object, echoing the Mesopotamian depictions. The anomaly is clear. These are not casual similarities. The combination of bucket, cone, and symbolic bracelet constitutes a specific ritual shorthand, repeated across cultures that should not have known each other. To explain this puzzle, scholars have proposed three main theories. The first is the possibility of the diffusion of ideas. The symbol originated in the ancient Near East, perhaps Göbekli Tepe, and slowly spread across the globe through migration, trade, or cultural exchange. Over millennia, the ritual pose traveled, evolving subtly, but retaining its core elements. However, the gaps in the archaeological record make this path nearly impossible to trace. What about if they are independent inventions? Separate civilizations confronted the same existential questions: life, divinity, and purification, and independently created similar symbolic solutions. The bucket, the cone, and the sacred figure are logical artifacts to express these concepts. Yet the precision of the resemblance strains credulity. But according to Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious, certain images, such as the world tree, the sage, or the container of life, appear spontaneously in human cultures. In The Significance of Constitution and Heredity in Psychology, he observed that mythological motifs and symbols often arise without direct influence or personal acquisition. These primordial images, or archetypes, form a foundational layer of the human psyche, reflecting the inherited psychic life of ancestors from the earliest beginnings. Within this framework, recurring symbols may emerge independently in different cultures, shaped by a collective unconscious that carries deep, universal patterns of meaning. In the context of these ritual images, Jung's theory offers a way to understand why the same combination might appear across disconnected civilizations. These symbols could represent fundamental human concerns, manifesting naturally from shared psychic structures rather than through direct transmission. Each explanation illuminates part of the puzzle, but none fully resolves it. But something even more confusing about the appearances of these objects continues to bug the researchers. Why would such an intricate multi-object ritual consistently appear in such widely separated regions? Historians have noticed something striking in the ancient depictions of the bucket and cone motif. While it appears across vast distances and time periods, it is completely absent in several major civilizations that one would expect to have adopted or adapted it. How could such a precise ritual image travel thousands of miles and centuries, yet skip entire regions? Take ancient Egypt, for example. Despite strong cultural and trade contact with Mesopotamia, Egyptian art shows no figures performing bucket and cone purification rituals. Egyptians had a rich symbolic repertoire, the Ankh for life, sacred trees such as the sycamore fig associated with Hathor, but the Mesopotamian-style ritual scene never appears. Also, in the Indus Valley Civilization, which is contemporary with early Mesopotamia and has extensive trade networks, there are seals, figurines, and urban layouts that suggest ritual sophistication, yet there is no trace of the bucket and cone motif. While Greek and Roman cultures inherited some Near Eastern myths, they did not adopt the iconography of winged figures with buckets and cones purifying trees. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.